We'll actually be serious right on the hour.
Okay. Wait,
But
that would be new for us.
We'll actually be intentionally silly on the hour.
So I can continue to shop for stuff.
You're shopping?
I've been looking for a bike. I've just bought the kids' mountain bikes. And
Yeah?
I'll start riding with them. So I've been looking for one because I don't have one.
I have one that definitely wouldn't fit you.
Yeah, well, it's an XL.
It's ginormous.
Yeah, it probably is. Although traditionally, like XL frame, I am about an XL frame size. You must just be an XL frame size with the seat massively up.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because they don't go even the biggest ones tend to be like 5'10" and above.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm not exactly a mountain bike connoisseur individual kind of a person.
Yeah.
So
really what I'm looking for is a great bike for really cheap.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you are listening to this, we apologize.
No, we don't. We're welcome to our nonsense.
I apologize because I actually care about our listeners. No. Hey, it's on the hour. We're live, whether we're live or not.
Whether we've been live for the last few minutes arguing about who cares about you almost.
Yes. So I made the mistake of updating Pro Presenter, which is our little pre-show music thingamabobber that you guys hear. And then it made it so it doesn't work anymore. So I actually don't know when that started, but hopefully, if you would like to donate a mountain bike to Alex, he was looking for mountain bikes before the show.
A good mountain bike.
Oh, okay, perfect. So on the show today, we actually have a challenge that was issued to us, and here's the deal. Alex is on a special diet. Oh, wow. My camera angle's horrible also.
Oh, that's so interesting. It looks like we're like on a boat that's sinking.
Yeah, interesting.
Can we fix that?
I'm just going to move it real quick and entertain.
I keep talking about what? Yes. There was an Englishman, an Irishman, and a Scottishman. No, wait, hold on. So we did have some requests for a what is called the Saltine Challenge. Now, I love I'll be honest. I was a youth pastor for a lot of years, and so Saltine Challenges was exactly the sort of thing that we used to do with students. And I am now trying to be all sophisticated and not youth pastorish.
Oh wow, that's still bad.
That's actually worse. I think you actually made the angle worse.
I did. Darn.
Did you turn it the wrong way?
Should I look at the camera maybe?
Maybe, I don't know. Should we just start again? We'll be back next week with a rebrand. That looks better than it was. And given that a whole chunk of people don't even listen or watch.
Don't even watch.
Yeah, it's just listen.
Yep. All right. So yeah, saltine cracker, and you.
So the theory is you cannot. It is impossible to eat 6 saltine crackers in 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Without a drink, like theoretically. Now I believe. Like, if anyone could do this, you are the sort of person that can do this. I don't know. You just have a superpower for these kind of things.
Really?
Just like the
So
the normal rules of physicality don't apply to you.
So someone issued this challenge because why?
Well, because we talked about thirst last week. So one of the things, and I think we did maybe even talk about like at least running people through an imaginary version of this in the service at one point.
Yeah, because we had communion.
And we were talking about Jeremiah, the prophets. He creates this illustration where he says, the people of Judah have done 2 incredible things. They've forsaken God, the fountain of life, and they've dug themselves cisterns that cannot hold water.
Yeah.
Now that sounds kind of bad to us in the 21st century, but in the time that it was written, water was very scarce. No one's blasé about water.
Yeah.
No one turns away from real springs. You don't have any real springs. Like you got maybe 1 or 2, and if you find one, it's like gold. So to them, it's horrific. Now we just don't even understand thirst, I think is the difficult thing.
Yes. And so on Sunday, we took communion, which we typically get the little
Cracker.
Mm-hmm. and you had them take the cracker and then hold off to take the wine or the juice rather. And the idea was just as a small little nudge, but then someone issued the challenge.
Yeah.
And so we were actually going to shift the challenge because Alex is trying to avoid wheat right now.
Yeah.
And so the challenge for Alex will be FOMO.
Yeah.
He's going to fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And so he's going to have to watch me eat 6 crackers. So if you're on the audio podcast, we're sorry. You don't get to
hear
see
is like munch.
This could be horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. If this is like the lowest rated episode that we ever do, we need to find out who sent that question in, and then we're going to hold them accountable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm just supposed to eat them in a minute. Yeah, you can eat them in whatever form you want. And I don't know if it's a minute or 30 seconds. I can't remember.
Well, according to the question that was submitted, I feel like I'm on a game show. All
absolutely, yeah. It's very David Letterman.
6 saltines, 60 seconds, no water.
Hold on.
Do you want to time me?
I was actually just going to look up the saltine.
No, because I feel like this is probably easier than theirs.
That might be true. Yeah,
the real one.
No. In 60 seconds to eat 6 saltine crackers. In theory, it's impossible. Although this just says it's difficult. Although the challenge may sound trivial, it is difficult because the crackers quickly exhaust the saliva in the mouth. Even though 6 saltines can fit in one's mouth at the same time, and a minute is plenty of time to chew, the resulting mass of crumbs is still difficult to swallow with a dry mouth.
Wow. How far our podcast has come.
I know, absolutely. Apparently Peyton Manning did it, though.
Yeah? Ooh, Peyton Manning. Me and Peyton Manning in the same, category.
Okay, so if you want any advice in entering into this.
Whoa. Okay, all right.
You want advice?
I don't know, maybe. Do I want to just
So Peyton Manning failed the first time.
Ooh.
Because he tried doing them one at a time.
Oh.
And he succeeded the second time when he stacked them all.
I was definitely going one at a time. So that might have been
apparently
that's cheating.
Well, according to Peyton Manning, and apparently Peyton Manning is that personality. He will work out a way to do anything. He's just that competitive.
Yeah. All right. Well, here we go. The 6 confirm 6 crackers.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Are they official brand? Are they branded?
I don't know.
Crackers?
So I told Teresa, who kind of curates these questions for us. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't have any salty crackers. She's like, guess what's on your desk?
No.
I was like, oh no, I have to do the challenge. All right.
I told her I was just going to watch because of my diet, and she was like, that's brilliant. I like that.
All right, here we go.
They're gone. Let's see what you can do. It's 106. Oh, I've got a little watch hand and stuff. I feel like the size of your mouth gives you an advantage. You actually look like you're making it really easy. It's quite embarrassing. I don't know if I came up with this. This looks like you just breeze through this. You've even got time to hum, and you've got like a whole 40 seconds left. Have you ever looked into like what your saliva production is compared to the average person? Oh, now see the time is starting to catch up on you. You've got 20 seconds left.
Oh, wow.
No, not going to happen. Because you've only got, now you're coming up to 10 seconds, 9 seconds, 8, 5.
I can't.
Oh, no. See, it is impossible, even for someone like you. I was going to give you 4 seconds grace because I may have looked at the wrong time. No, still not there, still going. Wow, there we go.
Half gone.
Half gone. Okay. Well, we'll take it as a moral victory.
I managed to swallow.
What thirst is. Although I'm intrigued because of your like upbringing, growing up in Rwanda. I feel like you must have had more appreciation for water than the average American kid. Is that fair or not fair?
I guess in a little bit. I don't think I was ever thirsty.
Yeah.
But
you must have been aware, like, well, some people didn't have water, or do you feel like as a 10, 11-year-old kid, you just weren't processing those kind of things?
Well, we had to ration water.
Yes, there's that, even that.
City
like,
water would shut off.
Yeah.
For days.
There's this great little Instagram reel going around at the moment of a guy who's...
Whoa.
Yeah, you okay?
I'm good.
He's like, it's like a young millennial guy, even Gen Z guy, and for some reason he's shirtless. I can never figure out why he's shirtless in the video. But he's asking, like, is it true that you used to drink from the hose pipe when you were kids, like you guys that are like older? And is that because you were like there were no sinks? Like, why was it? And this guy's like with this beard, like probably in his like mid-40s, has done this whole cool video about like pretending like we weren't allowed in the house.
Yeah.
You know, and we had this great place, the outdoors, and you know, it's a magical place. Many people today have not seen the place. And then he talks about drinking from the hose pipe and stuff. Yep. I mean, so I think the thirst that we grew up with physically was always, you could always deal with it in some way, even if it was drinking out of a hose pipe. My experience going to places like Haiti was watching the excitement about the arrival of clean water.
Yeah.
You know, they would, the one of the staff guys would bring in like a truck loaded with all these little bags of water. And just the excitement on the kids' faces was just a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Philippines, same deal, going to collect water. We go in the back of the jeepney and like have these huge barrels of water that we bring in for people.
Yeah.
So I think there is just in the West, this complete lack of appreciation for what it might be to not have water.
Yes. And we definitely had to ration water in Rwanda. We'd have a big cistern that was elevated that my dad welded together himself. And he would fill that when we did have water, city water. And then when we didn't have city water, we would ration it. You'd, take showers with just like turn on the water, wet yourself briefly, quick rinse, soap up, rinse, 30-second shower. Yeah,
we did the same, like Philippines, like say like half a bucket of water over your head, like soap up, the rest of the water over your head to wash off the soap and stuff like that. That was a shower. And it was always cold. It wasn't heated. It was so I think we living in a world where we get on tap hot water, flush toilets, all of those different things. Even like you remember what was the ALS challenge that people were doing for a while? It was the ice bucket thing.
Ice bucket challenge. I think you guys should ice bucket challenge, Alex.
Yeah, now you've done the saltines cracker. I should do the ice bucket one.
Yeah, there's no wheat in ice buckets.
I actually think me not doing it was a great advantage to the sense that the podcast made.
Yes, there'd just be this dead space
at least able to navigate people through
well over 60 seconds, nothing happening on the podcast.
We've got dead air. I think it was Matt Damon that did it like with water from the toilet. Because he said, he's works with a lot of water charities and stuff. And he said, I just wanted to highlight the fact that the water in my toilet is cleaner than the water in like 1/3 of the world.
Wow.
So just wanting people to capture that. Like, it's like we might think, oh yeah, that's gross. But a lot of people would use that as drinking water. Quite happily because of
which I think brings us to this next question. In the sermon today, we talked about being thirsty and more specifically being thirsty for the Lord. My question is, how do we grasp what it means to be thirsty when we do not lack basic needs of humanity? And basically the same thing we're just talking about.
Yeah, does the salt...
I've never experienced that kind of...
Did the saltine crackers work for you?
To make me appreciate liquid? Yes.
For a moment, yeah.
For a moment.
Yeah.
Yes, it absolutely did. There is a moment where you're in the middle there. Like, I felt like, I'll just swallow to win the challenge. You can't swallow
yeah.
until you have at least enough moisture to let it go down your throat.
Yeah.
You just physically can't swallow. I tried at the end. So, yeah. So I think to answer this is you have to start to find, I'm like burping into the microphone and everything. You have to find, so where are we actually thirsty? And we've talked about this on the podcast a bunch in the past where we're maybe relationally thirsty.
Yeah.
So
the physical thirst, even like in the moment, you can't replicate it because we can't take away the fact that we can end our own suffering whenever we want. So even if I were to go and say, I'm just going to go without water for the next 3 days, or however long the maximal not risky length is. I think it's less than 3 days. Still, at any point, I can just say, right, I'm just going to go get a drink. The ending is in my own power.
Yes.
And that's true of almost anything. I mentioned to you the other day, in the 90s, this great British band wrote a song about poverty. And they talked about a rich girl who wants to experience poverty. She goes and ends up in a relationship with a guy who's poor, and he starts talking about all the things they'll do together to experience that. But his conclusion in the bridge is, but even if we do all that, you'll never really know it, because you can lie there in an apartment with roaches all over the wall, with nothing to eat, and all you have to do is pick up the phone and call your dad, and it's all over. Like you're back in the rich suburban environment you grew up in. Yeah. And he said, it's not like that for me. This is my life. This is permanent.
But see, isn't that actually... I mean, again, this is an illustration, and the appreciation for water when this text, which if you are just catching on to the episode, we're in the book of Jeremiah, and you already talked a little bit about
Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 12.
That section, that illustration of cisterns and wells and water and fountains, and so yes, they appreciated water more back then. But is that actually what he's saying?
No.
Because what he's saying is actually just like the girl in the song.
Yeah.
She could pick up the phone and call her dad and get out of the roach filthy. Yeah. And Jeremiah's point is, you could actually do something about this issue.
Yeah, so he's trying to get them to see just how baffling what they've actually done is.
Yes.
So that's the purpose of the metaphor. So
Which is part of that song too, right? Isn't it like that she's chosen to be in poverty? Isn't that part of the beauty of the song? Yeah,
totally. And of course, the irony of the song is that he's now a super rich rock star that's singing the song. Even though he used to be poor, he's like, well, he escaped it too. Yeah. But Jeremiah picks on an image that makes sense for them. It might be that another image makes sense for us. And we could pick like almost anything that I was trying to think of, like just like fun little metaphors that kind of translate. I was when I first met Dan Elliott, our associate pastor, he was telling me about how he moved to Colorado from the Midwest. Then he moved back to the Midwest briefly, and then came back to Colorado like a year afterwards.
Yeah.
It's like, once you've lived in the mountains, like, why do you go somewhere else? Like there's illustrations that we could pick up on that are probably similar for our society. I don't think the goal of the teaching or of the passage is to try and figure out physical thirst.
So the question finishes with this. I think I'm struggling to wrap my mind around being thirsty when I have not experienced need like others around the world. So yes, that illustration does seem to break down for us. But I guess the reality is, when this was written, they may not have been thirsty either physically. They may have had a higher appreciation for water. It was still an illustration of a deeper spiritual thirst. So even in the text, it's an illustration. It's not the direct
That's what I mean.
thing.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, really. It's supposed to highlight the absurdity of the neglect of the God of the universe for gods that aren't real, in Jeremiah's language. I mean, that's to him, it's around idol worship. That's the central learning point of the passage.
And so our thirst, so the equivalent for us is actually the same.
Yeah.
It's a spiritual thing. It's a hunger and thirsting for God. And the unfortunate part, maybe, that this is alluding to this in this question, is that I have a physical sensation when I have 6 crackers in my mouth that it's just dry, and my brain is sending signals. This is not okay. You need to deal with this. Spiritually speaking, that reflex is less physical and less obvious.
Yes.
You may actually be starving or like needing spiritual drink, and there's no physical reflex
Absolutely.
that tells you that. And that's scary.
Yeah, and you may never have experienced it before. Like there is this picture Jeremiah paints, because it's a teaching illustration, he wants to capture just how ridiculous from God's perspective this decision is. But he's deeply aware that there's a whole bunch of people that have never tasted the real thing. It's a mystery to them. It's like I'm going to pick a ridiculous example. It's like the first time my wife took me to Chick-fil-A. Like I'd eaten other fast food and stuff like that, and I got to Chick-fil-A. I was like, this is so much better than anything else I've ever had. This is now of course it can never
what a good
tap into that.
pastor likes Christian chicken.
I didn't even know it was a Christian thing then. There are things that we've all missed out on that we have no idea how good they are.
Yeah.
And we have conversations with people that are like, oh, if you only knew, you'd never keep doing this again.
Yeah.
There's the thing and the fake thing. I took my wife out to this fancy restaurant at some point, and we ate steak that was just absurdly good. I mean, just so well done. And then we went to Applebee's the next night with some friends. And you just have this moment as you I'm trying to hack apart this Applebee's sirloin steak that just the knife's broken and bent. I will get through this at some point. I think had I taken the steak off the plate, the cow had a decent chance of recovering its health. It was that undercooked and stuff. That we have these absurdities in everyday life that probably work better for us as analogies than the water analogy. But for them, it works.
So then how do we get to this? So the challenge of the message, it was to stoke our thirst, maybe?
Yeah.
Or ensure that we're actually drinking from cisterns that can actually hold water.
So I think there's a couple of things, right? In my mind, at least as I was prepping, there's the things that fake satisfy. And so one of the teaching points, I guess, is be aware of what that is for you. Because I know there's actually a whole bunch of stuff that can actually give me a decent sense of easy satisfaction.
Yeah.
I can sit and watch a whole bunch of, I once binge watched a whole 2 seasons of Game of Thrones in a day and a half, I think it was. No wife and kids around. They were gone for the week. I just sat and my couch, it actually got a groove in it. The couch was physically damaged from the amount of hours that I sat in it. We had to throw that section away. So in the moment, I'm like, yeah, this is great. This is easy. This feels pretty wonderful. And then afterwards, you kind of ugh.
Yeah. And so I think that's where this question is getting at is what do you mean? And that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Have you ever turned to something and thought, oh, you know what I really need is I just need some me time.
Yeah.
And me time means I get to do what I want, when I want, or I get to go out to eat to a place that I want.
Yeah.
And then when you experience it.
Yeah.
And then you're done. So when you stood up from that day and a half or 2 days of binge watching it, did you feel just spiritually, emotionally, psychologically just full of life?
No, you kind of just know there's nothing there.
It's just empty.
No there.
That's the cistern that doesn't actually hold water.
And maybe even I mentioned this on the podcast. I bizarrely picked up an old game that I'd played as a kid when I was on paternity leave, and I looked at the game time after the week. I was like, oh my goodness, how did I play that this much? That's horrific. And so there's this sense of just dissatisfaction, even when it feels in the moment like satisfaction, and that can cover a whole range of things. One of the questions was, what are some examples? And the problem is almost anything can be an example.
Yeah. So that was the other question. Let me just read it. So can you give me some tangible life examples going after cisterns instead of going springs of water?
So theoretically, everything from the very best things about life to the very worst things about life can be a cistern. If you think about it like that.
Yeah. So
heroin can be a cistern.
Yeah.
Liquor, alcohol of all kinds can be a cistern. There's all prostitutes, sleeping with prostitutes could be a cistern. marriage could also be a system. Parenting could also be a system. Work could also be a system. Where I think we struggle massively is like we see people. Some people use the language of like explode versus implode. And it's what it is to become addicted and get your satisfaction from something. And an explode is when you're like, yeah, I get it from drugs. And now I'm like broke, lost my house, lost my family. And I keep going back to the same thing just to get that hit that will make me feel human for a second.
Yes.
So that's exploding. Imploding is the opposite. It's the workaholic. It's the, I'm going to build the business.
So that's what I was going to get to. So for me, because I like try and do reverse psychology on myself, because I want to have my cistern that doesn't hold water, but I want that cistern to have the appearance of being a well. Yeah. So this is how wacky my brain is. And my sinful nature is so twisted.
It's warped.
It's twisted and warped where I try and play my mind games with myself and with the people around me to say, oh, my cisterns are better than your cisterns. At least, like, I don't do, like, drugs and stuff.
Totally.
But, so my cistern, one of my big ones is education.
Yeah.
So, like, when I'm trying to avoid God or avoid an issue or avoid, a lot of times, I'll just do a deep dive into some subject.
Yeah.
And I'll study, like, sometimes it's innocuous, but like I'll study like how to make espresso really, really well.
Yeah.
For like 30 hours.
Some of the most random things about stuff. Like and it's not everything, but just topics will come up and suddenly it's like you mentioned something. I'm like, oh no, Aaron at some point has gone full nerd on this subject. Like,
yes, which is like, sometimes a cistern. Other times I'm like, oh, it's not even that meaningless. It's like, oh no, I'm studying the Bible.
Yeah.
Or I'm studying a theological side subject matter. And so my cistern, not only is it not a pursuit of God, even if it's a pursuit of his word, but it also puffs up my pride sometimes and my self-righteousness. Like my cisterns are better than your cisterns. It's like your cistern is taking drugs or doing this or that, but my cistern is like education and about the Bible. And ooh,
I have the
twisted.
Best cistern that doesn't hold water in the church.
and then you go through that for months. And yes, okay, mind you, it's not exploding.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like losing my job over that, but it does affect my family and it hurts. And then if I've done that for too long, man alive, my soul feels so dry. And that's what it is, that soul dryness where you're like, God, I'm missing you. There's something like you wake up in the morning and you're like, why is today? Yeah. Why is there anything that I'm doing that has any meaning or value? And if you felt that feeling, that's the thirst.
Yeah.
That then you're like, well, okay, so what am I going to do today to fill this hole? I get a chance to go this, or I'm going to go get myself an extra special cup of coffee on the way to work, and that's going to like calm down this anxiety that I'm meaningless and purposeless in life. Do I sound like I know this feeling too much?
Yeah, just a little bit. I'm like, wow, it feels like we've got a couch. Do you need to lie down?
Yeah. How do I really feel? Like, you're like, wow, you just described it very, very well.
Should have had you preach this week. There's so much in that. And there's so much to, like, you might call it addiction. I was reading to my wife, perhaps mistakenly, interview with Tim Keller, who was talking about how his wife had come to him and said, basically, you're really wise and frugal on all of your financial spending, except with books. Like you spend a fortune on books.
Yeah.
And she said, and I know why you do it, because part of your identity is you want to look smart. So you believe that by buying lots of books, that shows that you're smart. And I'm reading this to my wife, and I'm like, okay, can I abort this? Like, I'm like, because I buy a ton of books, like, like trying to hide under the table or something.
Why did I
like,
read that out loud to you? Now my sister is under the spotlight.
Yeah.
Spotlight.
And then Tim Keller said, no, but it's fine because Jesus told me to buy books and the books need me. And that's the end of the interview. just trying to bail out.
Yeah.
Russell Brand, the comedian, in his recovery as a drug addict, talks about how he almost feels lucky that his addiction, it's an explosion. And he says, it's so obvious, it can't be hidden from. And what he says to the crowd reads in his book, he says, the problem is most of you guys won't find it out till you're 60 or 70.
Yes.
So you won't know what the cistern is. And you've been scrabbling around for water in this thing that can't give it.
I think there's this passage that's super interesting when it comes to this. And I think it's like Paul is talking about this. Let's see if I can find it here. Oops. Well, carry on. I shouldn't have mentioned it.
I can just carry on. I can always carry on talking.
Yeah.
It's my cistern. So I now I suddenly can't think of anything to say.
I was close.
You were?
I just panicked because it was dead air. So, Philippians chapter 3, and Paul goes to, I guess I should put this on the screen. Sorry, folks. Here, I think you're looking at my screen, but you aren't yet. Ta-da! There's my video switcher. But whatever were gains for me. So he opens up this chapter and he says, "I was a Hebrew of Hebrews,
I got
of the tribe of Benjamin." It's kind of like it's kind of like his way of going like, I was a Hebrew of Hebrews of the tribe of Benjamin. I was spiritual. I was zealous. I was all of these different things. But then he turns and he says here in verse 7, "But whatever gains to me, I consider loss for the sake of Christ." And I think, this is not a neutral, which ironically, so everything that he lists is actually really good. Yeah. He had great parents. Yeah. That made sure that he was circumcised on the eighth day.
Educated him.
He was educated in the scriptures. Yeah. He all of these different things that should have been positive things. He doesn't put them in neutral. Yeah. And just add Jesus and then they're extra magical. Yeah. He actually calls them detrimental to his soul. Yeah. Because of exactly what you're just saying. He's basically saying I thought I was okay. Yeah. Because of those things, but I was actually blind. Now, if let's say he grew up and he was this horrible person who never did anything, his parents beat him, horrible existence, whatever, and he had all these addictions, he knows clearly that he's broken. Yeah. And at least he's one step closer to surrender because of that. Yeah. In his situation, and the reason I get passionate about this is it's much of my life. I was out of my siblings. I was the good kid. I chose to go to Bible college.
See that.
I chose to do this. I chose to do that.
You're not even the oldest sibling either, are you?
No, I'm the middle kid, and I was the one who my parents would tell me to do something, and I would be like, "Okay, I'll do that," and I would just obey, and on and on and on. And then it took me years and years into my walk with Jesus before I realized that I was broken. Yeah. And so I'd never actually surrendered to the heart of God because I was like, why would I need to? And so my cisterns were very well crafted and designed to have the appearance of holding water, but they didn't.
So here's where I think I totally agree. I think the struggle for us as human beings, this isn't even a Western 21st century thing, which I think a lot of our struggles are Western 21st century things. This is just a human thing. We don't know what we don't know. We haven't experienced what we haven't experienced. So where I think Jeremiah's analogy is really helpful for us is we don't know what the fountain of life is like if we haven't experienced it. We're missing this important piece of information. When you don't know the fountain of life, of course you scrabble around digging cisterns. Of course you look for water wherever you can find it. Of course you hope that the rainy season will give you enough to last through the dry season. Like, that's just absolutely natural. And so part of the problem is, like, recognizing thirst is one side of the equation. Experiencing the thing that satisfies thirst, or actually even more interestingly, like it actually, I think, just increasingly builds more thirst. Like in a good way. Like, it constantly sends you back to the fountain. This isn't a drink once and be forever happy thing. This is a orient your life around access to this spring that doesn't run dry and never gets old and is always fresh and new. Like that's the picture it paints. And so, like, the only like illustration that comes to mind that maybe gives us a little bit of that is, if you ever have watched a little child eat food for the first time, like I'm talking like baby 6 months old, like
I watch that every day.
Right now, you're right in that phase right now. Like, so they've grown up on milk, whether it's formula, whether it's like breast milk or whatever, and then suddenly you start handing them like bits of avocado or mashed up bits of whatever, like, you know, the little pots that come to the thing. And you watch their face as they get those first like senses of flavors. And there's like kind of this building, like, no, I want more of that. And you have this moment as a parent where you're like, oh, my dear, there is so much more than this. Like, I mean, we're starting you off on like these basic, like bland, mushy, whatever, but wait until you experience what it is to eat ice cream on a hot day. Wait until you experience what it is to eat steak that's just out of. Wait until you experience what it is to get your first sense of like a freshly fried donut or something like that. There's so much more than just the first taste of real food.
Yes.
And so yeah, that first taste, well, that matters. That's important. It's a building block to later appreciations of food and all those different things. And so recognizing where we have looked for our thirst to be satisfied is important, but somewhere there has to be these first experiences of God that start to give you a sense of just how good the fountain is.
Yeah, and that just reminds me of this passage in Psalm 34:8 says, "Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him." I love that text because it's basically that challenge. It's that challenge to say, if you've ever tasted it, like it is, a lot of times before I lead worship at South, and we pray as a team beforehand, and a lot of the times I'll pray this prayer. I'll say, Lord, may we taste and see that the Lord is good, and having tasted, never want anything else.
Yeah.
So
that's the challenge. The challenge in that, though, is like somewhere, again, Jeremiah's metaphor breaks down. When you realize that the fountain of life is what sustains you and what you need, but the access to it is not always as easy as the access will be to cisterns that we come to rely on.
There's the trouble, right?
Yeah.
Like the reflex of thirst physically is so palpable. I know I just experienced it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But the reflex for spiritual or soul thirst is so, like the soul. Dallas Willard, I think it was Dallas Willard who said that the soul is the quietest member of the self.
Definitely said that. Yeah.
And that's annoying.
Yeah.
Because the soul actually is really good at diagnosing the state of your entire self. And you have body, soul, mind, spirit, all of these things. And the soul, Dallas Willard would describe as the executive center of the self. And the soul is so quiet and still and whispering and knows whether we're okay or not okay, but it's not loud enough to overcome the noise around us.
And even just on a human level, like even if you're not someone who would say you're following Jesus, like we know just by experience, like bad relaxation is easier than somewhat healthy relaxation. Like last night, like Laura was trying to do something with Leo, our youngest, and I was trying to finish some work up, and I just looked at her at some point and said, do you want to just order Chinese food tonight? So we just put in an Uber Eats and the Chinese food, and I ate it, and I was like, ugh, I just regret it. Like, I wish I hadn't eaten that. It just felt heavy in my stomach. It was the easy opt-out. Actually, had we taken time to cook something freshly made and all those different things, I would have felt so much better. So just by nature, like, easy relaxation is what grabs us. There's a prayer that I've prayed multiple times when we've gathered as staff or elders, and it goes something like, as we gather our scattered senses.
Yeah.
Recognizing, like, brains, when we come to prayer, are often all over the place, processing the day, the future, the past, our like sense of just any sense you can pick is like they're just all over the place.
Yeah.
Actually bringing them in to a point where the soul can rise to the surface and become the centerpiece of our lives, and its connection with God can be the focus of the moment.
Yeah.
That's work. That certainly is a learned behavior. There's plenty of times I'm like, do you know what? It'd be so much easier to press the button on the TV and find a show that I can just watch for a few hours. So much easier.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe let's pivot. I think we've answered, at least done our best job of answering these questions. So let's pivot to, like, okay, what do we do about this? So what are some steps that maybe, as we've talked about it, someone out there is saying, yeah, you know what? Maybe there is this dryness that I haven't really acknowledged, that a feeling of depression, and not all depression is just this. There's other variables involved in that, but it's that waking up and feeling like, I'm still going through the motions. Maybe those are some warning signs of dryness of the soul. What do they do about it? How do they increase their thirst for God, and how do they quench their thirst for God?
Wait, I just answered the last question. This is yours. Right?
No, but you're the pastor of the chair. You have to answer all the hard ones first.
Well, here's what I'm intrigued by with that. Like, I just wonder, based on personalities, how the answer changes. So
yeah.
So I think we're a church that firmly believes that spiritual practices, lead to experiences with God. They aren't the experience themselves, but they are like memory. And they're easier the more you do them when life is normal, the easier it is to do them when life gets really difficult.
Yeah.
So don't wait until there's a crisis to say, I'm going to actually take prayer seriously. Do it now. Now, depending on your personality, you might say, oh, I find that so hard, for a couple of different reasons, at least.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who, and I would fit this category more, if you're someone who is super scattered in your thoughts and emotions, like I would never describe myself as a super disciplined person. Actually, a little bit of discipline can actually start to lead you into a good place with spiritual rhythms.
Yeah.
So like even something like making your bed in the morning, which I self-confessedly don't do, usually because my wife and Leo are still asleep in it.
Yeah.
Like they can help, but psychologists that aren't necessarily followers of Jesus talk about this. Jordan Peterson talks about first step, tidy up your room.
Clean up your room.
Clean up your room. Like actually putting some like physical, controllable elements of, you can see the progress, you can see what's changed, can actually help you step into becoming a person that says, okay, this morning I'm going to make a cup of coffee. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to read some passages from the Bible. I'm going to ask God to speak to me. And I'm going to ask him to help me experience him and become thirsty because of it. Yep. So if you're that person, something practical like that probably helps. Where it's harder for me to understand the person is if you're the other way. Like everything about your life is rigid, uniform, super disciplined. I do this, I do this, I do this. Because your problem probably isn't picking up the Bible. If you value it, you probably do that anyway.
Yeah.
It's probably not praying. It's probably connected more to any idea that God would accept someone like you, because you probably come with a whole bunch of baggage around like not being good enough and everything.
Yeah. So weirdly, sometimes the spiritual practice if you're very systematized and very regimented, that might be a cistern in and of itself, an attempt to quiet the voice that you're not good enough. And maybe a spiritual practice for you is to skip reading.
Yeah.
And going for a
second, I thought you were
walk.
going to say skip church. I was like, that's never the practice. No.
I've actually recommended it once. There was this guy
me
I was talking to, and he said, I went over to his house just to hang out with him, and he just pulled me aside. And he said, I'm just so sorry. I missed church last month. And I'm just like devastated, and I've been thinking about it like crazy, and I feel so much guilt and so much shame. And I was like, whoa. I was like, your relationship with going to church is not what that is supposed to be. Going to church is a gift.
Yeah.
It is not a means of salvation. And so I said, as your pastor, maybe not yet. Maybe that this is too precarious for you, but I would like you to go to church in the presence of God and not go to church for a week.
Yeah.
And just know that this is okay.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
And so anyway, but
I had a friend that he fasted prayer for 6 months. Like he said, like, I feel so guilty every time I don't pray. I never feel like I've prayed enough. And he said, so I just decided for 6 months I wasn't going to consciously like spend time in prayer. And he said, I was hitchhiking through New Zealand, like dead road. And he said, in that moment, I stood on the side of the road, hadn't seen a car for hours. And I said, God, could you show me you love me right now? And he said, this car came over the hill right as he prayed it. And of course, it could easily just be a coincidence. But, you know, it just, when I pray, coincidences happen. And when I don't, they don't. So he said, like, I had to step back from some of my addiction. Taking a nap can be a great practice at times if you're someone who's addicted to achievement.
So my wife is way more systematic than I am, and she's so faithful. Like, gosh, if I could bottle an ounce of her faithfulness to like spend time with the Lord and exercise, and like she just has rhythms that are so beautiful and so powerful, and without them, our family probably would fall apart. But one of the things she's been talking about is like she has on her mirror like, it's okay to take a nap. Like, so that's one of the things she's fighting for, is there's a moment where she has to step back and say, I need to do a little bit of soul care here, or rest my body because it's physically tired, and she struggles to let go of that and actually rest into some of those sorts of things. And, there's different ways of approaching it. So it's hard to answer it universally.
Totally. Yeah. I really feel like it is. And yet, we're trying to just grapple with the invitation part of it from the heart of God, which is life is so good over here in the fountain. So much better than it is scrambling around in the cisterns.
Yeah, so maybe a prayer you could pray is, Lord, I want to taste and see that you're good.
Yeah.
And just find a way to pray that, whether you're walking or sitting down or making your cup of coffee or whatever, and just say, I want to taste and see that you're good.
And I think,
I want to experience that, because once I've experienced it a few times, it's a little bit easier to return to the well rather than to the cistern.
And I think I wonder whether for lots of people in the Western church, our struggle is that we're not really that convinced that God is good. And I'm using good now, not in the sense of, I think we're pretty convinced he's morally good, even if there's some people that might have those questions. But we're not particularly convinced he's enjoyable, fun, really interested in us, or really likes us.
Yeah.
I think the loves question is like, most people are like, yeah, God definitely loves me. Does he like me? Yeah. I don't know. I don't even like me, really.
Yeah.
So I think like we struggle with that when we say taste and see that the Lord is good. Morally good, yeah. Good as in good to be around? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's something you can only experience. And what I love is I've heard this repeatedly from people over the years, people that have spent more and more time with God. They've used language like, God and I have been laughing together a lot recently, mostly at me. Like that piece of like the conversation. You've touched on this.
Yeah.
Like, there's this like, part of your interaction with God. The missionary Jim Elliot said before he went out to South America, he said, we just sit and we laugh at my own inconsistencies and the way I get so wound up about so many things like that.
Yeah. Or I think another spiritual practice that may help you also is to another passage that says every good and perfect gift comes from God. And so to practice the spiritual practice of gratitude, but go small.
Yeah.
Like if you really like coffee, say thank you for designing and creating coffee, because so like sometimes those little things, or for me it's like the sky is, I don't know what it is about the sky. I'm like there's times where I'll go outside and there's a sunrise or a sunset, and I'm outside and I just look up at the sky and I'm like, especially a sunrise, I love going out and there's most of the world around me is still sleeping. And I'm like, how comical is it that you would paint this majestic thing for no one to see, except for a few of us who are up at this hour? And I'm like, that's extravagant goodness and kindness that he would create this thing, and half the world is in bed. And he's like, this is how much excess goodness I have. I have the time,
wasteful goodness.
I have the time and energy to paint this masterpiece, and half the world is in bed. So I just love that kind of stuff. And then write those things down, and it reminds you that he is good in the best possible way that you could think of.
I'm trying to remember who was it that said that, like, our common understanding is that the sun is just the same every day. And yet it could be that God just creates the same sun every day and never gets tired of creating them. Like when you do, when you pull yourself back from it, like, and you know, the flowers that appear and everything, like God is constantly excited by the springs that emerge, like the rhythms that appear. And I think finding ways to bring your relationship with God into things that you love, is a challenge for us. We do that instinctively with people. You know, I've got a pal that I go skiing, snowboarding with, and JD loves to snowboard. He's always inviting people snowboarding and skiing. And now he's tried to get me into mountain biking, which I don't love. And yet at the same time, I appreciate his desire to, like, his value on it is like, okay, yeah, he really values this as a thing, and he wants me to value it too. He thinks my life will be better with it. And we struggle with that with God, I think. We struggle to think he could be interested in that. Like when you get that great cup of coffee that you like the fact that God is actually excited by your great cup of coffee and your enjoyment of it, it's a bit difficult for us to grasp at times. I had a pal that used to say, I go playing golf with God. Like, you know, we'll just have conversations as I hit the golf balls and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's
and,
disc golf for me, spiritual practice.
Totally. And he says, you know, in my imagination, God doesn't play because he'd be much better than I am. Like, that'd make me sad.
Yeah.
It's just an invitation, though, right?
So if you want to explore this, there may be some books that you could start with. One would be 1,000 Gifts. It's about gratitude. Another book would be practicing the presence of God.
Celebration of Discipline by man, what is wrong with us today?
Yep.
Not
Celebration.
Richard Foster.
Yeah, not Dallas Willard. Richard Foster
is great.
Practicing the presence of God is an old school one, but it's also beautiful.
The Cloud of Unknowing is like a super, like it's an anonymous text, and it's like it's well out there, but it really taps into some of the mystical.
One of the ones I was trying to think of is
you know, I really love
the Liturgy of the Ordinary.
Yeah,
is another way that's like, how do I create a liturgy for doing the laundry, or a liturgy for making dinner, or whatever, and it helps you to experience the goodness of God and encounter and drink from the well of life in the everyday.
Naked Spirituality by Brian McLaren is a book. I've probably read that book more times than maybe any other book.
What is it?
Naked Spirituality.
I haven't read that one.
And Brian McLaren's one of those guys. I always feel like in an evangelical crowd, like I'm giving a caveat because I don't agree with everything he says, but that's almost true of every author for me. Like this,
I only agree with everything I say.
I don't even agree with everything I say.
Yeah, come to think of it, that's true. Yeah.
But what he does is he does a really great job of breaking down practices around words, and seasons of life. So he breaks like into like seasons of simplicity and complexity and perplexity, and then seasons of harmony, and just kind of feels out that rhythm, but in a world of spiritual disciplines too. So there's so many great books out there on that. It really is just finding something that works well for you in a season, and realizing that doing it in a season where life is feeling like it's manageable is so much easier than trying to learn it in a season where life feels like it's falling apart.
Yeah. And so, yeah, maybe that's the challenge, is you just gotta, there is, just like Jesus said to the woman in the well, there is a well that God offers that if you go and drink there, you would never thirst again. Mm-hmm. That's a thing. That's a thing in the kingdom of God. And so just dangle that carrot in front of you, and you need to experiment in the presence of God to find, how do I tap into that well? Because that well, if you've never experienced it, is the best thing you could possibly experience. And if you have experienced it and it's been a while, and your heart longs, even hearing us talk about it, your heart longs for it. So get back to that well in some way, shape, or form.
I love it.
Cool.
Way to close us off. After an hour of saltine crackers, wells, and Chick-fil-A.
Indeed.